One specific phrase has haunted the core of this entire mystery ever since we first decided to dive deep into making this video. A lot of people wanted her gone forever. 7 words. Take a moment to genuinely analyze that phrase, to truly reflect on it rather than just skimming past, and you will discover it holds multiple meanings. It carries a minimum of 2 distinct interpretations. Both are completely accurate. Both carry massive weight. Yet, surprisingly, neither interpretation matches the narrative. Mainstream media keeps pushing today. That statement is definitely no simple catchphrase. It forms the ultimate foundation of our investigation. Everything unraveling from here tackles one singular question from fresh angles. Who exactly are we referring to? And which woman? We definitely refuse to hand you those answers immediately. We plan to make you work for that clarity. First, consider the chair. Forget the mystery entirely. The vanishing, the federal probes, the written demands, or even the masked lurker caught on tape. We must begin exactly where this dark sentiment first originated, deep inside a towering Manhattan skyscraper, within a morning broadcast that has dominated national television screens since before modern nations existed. The morning broadcast anchor desk is absolutely not an ordinary object. That spot represents arguably the absolute most lucrative patch of broadcast territory across the nation. That broadcast pulls in nearly $200 million of yearly sponsor cash during its initial 2 hours. The person sitting there transcends mere hosting. They are the actual merchandise that the entire financial empire relies heavily upon. Viewers never simply watch the morning broadcast for the overall brand. Fundamentally, they tune in specifically for the anchor. People wake up uniformly, switch to that specific network, and demand their usual host waiting. That strict daily demand has nothing to do with mere nostalgia. It represents the core routine sponsors drop hundreds of millions of dollars annually to target. When that chair stays empty, not just for 2 days, not for a week, but for 2 full months, the massive corporate machine absolutely never hits pause simply to honor someone's private family crisis. The panic skyrockets because an unoccupied chair means more than an absent worker. It instantly becomes a golden opening. And daytime broadcast television boasts a ruthlessly cold track record regarding sudden career opening. Nancy Guthrie vacated her prominent spot on January 30th, 2026. She was actually already utilizing a prearranged health break for throat surgery. Announced December 19th, 2025. An update so entirely routine that coworkers actually threw her a playful, live televised goodbye party. Everyone expected her rapid return within weeks, perfectly timed for the Winter Olympics, safely returning long before audiences ever grew accustomed to a replacement face. However, late on the evening of January 31st, witnesses spotted her mother getting dropped off near her gorgeous residence tucked within the Catalina foothills of Tucson, Arizona. Then, by February 1st, authorities declared her mother completely vanished, instantly transforming that brief medical hiatus into an indefinite absence, entirely lacking any scheduled comeback date. Suddenly, that empty chair captured the intense attention of sharks who previously ignored it. We are not throwing malicious accusations here. We are merely analyzing how this cutthroat broadcast ecosystem naturally operates fundamentally. Top hosting gigs on premier daytime broadcasts never remain vacant without triggering massive ripple effects. Such voids instantly force massive corporate strategy shifts and crucial viewer analytics, fundamentally altering the extended network vision that top executives have secretly debated behind closed doors for several long years. Any sudden opening, regardless of the horrifying nightmare causing it, ultimately remains exploitable. Furthermore, executives carry a strict financial duty to assess and plug those slots perfectly. That truth definitely isn't just bitter pessimism. That perfectly explains the corporate logic behind a $200 million yearly marketing machine suddenly losing its main star. The absolute most telling corporate maneuver the network pulled off during the terrifying weeks after the mother vanished involved absolutely zero public comments, zero media blasts, and certainly no carefully sanitized broadcast updates. Instead, it was that desperate "Framtigdail to Hodakotp." Hoda previously exited the flagship program on January 10th, 2025. 16 legendary years gracefully concluded, the broadcast world acted exactly as expected when officially saluting an undeniable, legendary retirement. As she strolled out of Studio 1A that afternoon, Every single industry insider permanently agreed her daily grind had gracefully concluded. That chapter seemed definitively over, yet she shockingly returned on February 9th, 2026, refusing any simple guest appearance. She marched right back inside to dominate that desk. The actual reason this specific move exposes the network's internal panic, far better than any official press release, is incredibly simple. Executives never dial a retired titan just to plug a measly 2-week schedule gap. Producers never drag a beloved legend out of a peaceful year-long retirement if the impending crisis features a guaranteed finish line. They only beg a superstar to return when viewers desperately need comforting stability to mask a glaring missing face, especially while executives remain utterly clueless regarding when the actual original host might finally reappear. That represents an incredibly deliberate, calculated corporate strategy. It reveals a massive media conglomerate, thoroughly reviewing the terrifying facts of the disappearance. Ultimately realizing their usual backup roster of reporters simply lacked the heavy gravity required for the dark storm rapidly approaching. Daytime broadcasting never sells genuine journalism. It peddles comforting predictability. Change the hosts, and you instantly shatter audience loyalty alongside massive corporate profits. Recruiting the retired legend proved the absolute best band-aid for a terrifying broadcast nightmare. Executives could not confidently predict the end of her. Absolute necessity in that moment reveals exactly how massive this entire chaotic upheaval truly was. That massive upheaval exposes the brutal institutional and professional stakes dangling in the balance, while her anchor chair remained completely vacant. Craig Melvin sat right beside her. He remained consistently reliable and safe, carefully avoiding becoming the actual headline himself. Blending Hoda's incredible viewer connection with Melvin's strict journalistic neutrality gave the network their firmest possible grounding during an incredibly volatile and entirely unpredictable broadcasting nightmare. Consider this specific report from the Daily Mail, later echoed by the Irish Star. Network insiders actually painted the morning show studio as a complete snake pit while Savannah was away. Those identical leaks claimed a massive chunk of the staff secretly prayed she would permanently leave. Though we must handle that explosive allegation quite cautiously. Anonymous whispers fed to overseas gossip rags hardly guarantee absolute truth or automatic reliability right off the bat. We refuse to call it verified fact. Yet we must analyze these highly specific, intentional leaks because those precise phrases were undeniably calculated with distinct purpose. A snake pit, where colleagues genuinely prayed her tragic absence would become totally permanent. Nobody uses phrasing like that just to describe basic office disagreements. Such descriptions expose a toxic atmosphere where one peer's devastating personal emergency served as the perfect ladder for the ruthless career aspirations of completely different individuals, simultaneously opening rare doors and completely shuffling the broadcast spotlight, shifting crucial leverage among broadcasters who simultaneously pinned yellow ribbons to their lapels while preaching fake unity to 4 million loyal fans watching at home. The shiny facade of morning broadcasts rarely reflects their cutthroat internal realities. Every flagship breakfast program's legacy relies entirely on carefully maintaining a pleasant public illusion to mask vicious behind-the-scenes power struggles that fans will never witness. I am not just being unnecessarily pessimistic. That remains the fundamental nature of fiercely competitive corporate media, where success depends on screen time, strictly controlled by a tiny handful of executives. Savannah possessed the absolute highest profile gig in that entire building. Her disappearance left more than just a vacant seat. It sparked a massive resource shift, ultimately crowning brand new victors. Those newly minted champions often desperately want their advantageous circumstances to continue, highlighting the first major group driven purely by corporate greed. Wishing she would permanently vanish simply translates to praying that prime anchor spot remains unoccupied until another host officially claims the coveted title forever. This perspective hardly requires pure evil intent. Nobody necessarily needed to pray for tragedy to strike Savannah's household. They merely operated on standard, career-driven selfishness within a remarkably cutthroat corporate television machine. This ruthless ambition feels so completely normalized within elite broadcast networks that the participating talent probably never even recognized their own dark desires. It functions strictly as objective observation. A prime chair sits unoccupied. The drama continues unfolding, and somebody will inevitably reap massive rewards. We merely wonder who takes the crown. An inquiry that silently manipulates the actions of completely unsuspecting colleagues Grasping this concept avoids assuming pure wickedness, meaning nobody actually had to actively curse Savannah's poor relatives. It merely reflects standard corporate ambition functioning normally within a fiercely contested workplace ecosystem. Such brutal self-preservation remains so deeply ingrained in premium daytime broadcasting that industry insiders completely fail to identify their own opportunistic yearnings. It feels strictly like a clinical assessment of an empty anchor chair. The chaos persists indefinitely, guaranteeing a massive promotion for somebody waiting in the wings, leaving only one mystery. That lingering mystery subtly poisons the daily conduct of professionals who blindly surrender to its corrupting influence. Before discussing the next group entirely removed from Rockefeller Plaza's orbit, we absolutely must pause to examine the one individual caught dead center in this crossfire. Savannah remains the undisputed core of this whole nightmare, overshadowing Nancy, the ongoing police probe, and the morning program itself, effectively embodying two conflicting realities simultaneously. No professional playbook exists for this exact nightmare. Standard media training equips journalists for tense on-air segments or sudden breaking headlines, and even highly awkward interrogations. But flawlessly faking empathy during disasters never truly readies anyone to become the actual victim. You can never adequately prepare to be the actual headline while simultaneously reporting the news. Yet on March 26th and 27th, she sat down for a massive multi-segment exclusive with her co-host. This marked her primary televised return following the horrific disappearance. During that broadcast, she dropped a massive bombshell that permanently altered the investigation's trajectory, boldly admitting she genuinely doubted her mother was kidnapped strictly for financial motives. She firmly suggested the classic extortion narrative, assuming criminals simply wanted a quick payday from a rich household, failed to tell the entire chilling story. Her theory logically tracked, even though absolute certainty eludes us, proving her powerful words were never just random, spontaneous thoughts. Picture a confidant locked in briefing rooms with federal agents, harboring explosive secrets the public hasn't even heard yet. She drops calculated hints, whispering that the mainstream narrative hides a much darker reality beneath its surface. Media outlets typically anchor this entire mystery to a pair of specific days: January 31st, when Nancy Guthrie vanished, and February 1st, when the official search began. Yet by late March 2026, her relatives pleaded with Tucson locals to scour private cameras, desks, and personal journals. Buried deep within that desperate plea were three crucial days: January 31st, the pre-dawn stretch of February 1st, and the late night of January 11th. January 11th, exactly 3 weeks prior to her vanishing, holds a level of importance that is absolutely massive. Her relatives never picked that moment by chance, nor did the backing authorities slip it into the statement by accident. Whenever federal agents beg the public to rewind their memories 3 weeks prior to an incident, they do so because solid proof ties that older night to the February 1st tragedy. What exactly occurs 3 weeks ahead of such a sophisticated attack? Stalking, scouting, and piecing together the exact tactical blueprint needed to pull the whole thing off. The intruder breaching Nancy Guthrie's residence on February 1st already memorized the security setup, completely understood the floor plan, and possessed enough intel to run a flawless infiltration without improvising a single step. That deep insight had to be gathered beforehand. Detectives strongly suspect that the groundwork was laid, at least partially. On January 11th, 3 solid weeks of premeditation prove this was never a random snatching, but rather a meticulously crafted mission. That preparatory phase now officially sits in the police files. The January 11th detail completely validates the insider threat theory we have explored. A dedicated stalking phase simply does not happen blindly. It never unfolds in a quiet suburban cul-de-sac on any given evening, unless a specific target was already selected. That exact property on that particular Catalina Foothills Road was deliberately singled out. The attacker targeted it with inside knowledge, knowing Nancy lived there, mapping the grounds for a dark approach, and either memorizing or plotting out lens angles on January 11th. Bridging the gap between simply having an address and executing a flawless raid requires far more than dumb luck. It demands weaponized information, and weaponized information always traces back to a leak. By February 10th, federal agents finally shared their hand. 4 freeze frames alongside a brief video from the porch lens at the Guthrie residence. A heavily disguised, armed figure standing on the porch during the pre-dawn of February 1st Director Kash Patel stated that the lens was intentionally disabled at exactly 1:47 in the morning. Within 60 minutes of that action, her internal heart device failed to send its routine diagnostic report, marking the final absolute proof she was alive indoors. Instead of just listing visual details from the tape, we need to decode the hidden message. Because wearing a disguise isn't the real takeaway. The core issue is that the intruder never merely snatched a face covering as a last-minute afterthought. They concealed their identity because their rigorous advanced scouting revealed a porch lens waiting for them. Knowing full well an exposed profile meant getting caught and realizing that being recorded equals a swift prison sentence, using a disguise wasn't a gut reaction. It was a calculated tactical choice finalized weeks prior. That decision stems directly from January 11th, or whichever night they originally spied on the house. Hand protection echoes that identical narrative, as packing gloves proves an intense fear of leaving fingerprints behind. Worrying about forensic evidence prior to arrival demonstrates a deep obsession with the eventual police hunt, showing high-level tactical forethought. Speculation regarding a wireless signal blocker, though currently unverified by police sources, remains an active, investigative angle that could introduce a terrifying third tier of sophistication. Deploying network interference tech mandates understanding the local frequencies and exactly how killing them benefits the raid. That represents highly technical expertise aimed at a singular address, especially when combining the disguise, the signal blocker rumor, and the January 11th scouting run. Suddenly, you are no longer looking at a simple robbery, but rather a full-scale military offensive. An incredibly precise, data-fueled siege launched weeks before Nancy's porch lens finally cut out to black. Yet, based on the public breakdown by ex-federal agent Andrew Bringwell, a massive error occurred. Here is the twisted extortion angle that mainstream news networks completely failed to broadcast. Several blackmail demands flooded into local newsrooms barely days after she seemingly vanished into thin air. Digital kidnappers shocked the media, demanding instant, untraceable crypto payouts. Whispers suggested $6 million, alongside chilling letters detailing Nancy Guthrie's home and exact outfit on January 31st. These rare clues proved the captors had terrifying access. Federal agents officially verified that two distinct messages carried absolute credibility. The captors laid out two strict ultimatums, yet both expired. By February 4th, Savannah's family broadcasted a desperate video about the extortion. The siblings pleaded for open dialogue, announcing on February 7th that they had deciphered the terrifying message. Through tears, they begged for their mother's safe return, promising they would hand over whatever fortune was required. Standing exposed on national television, Savannah Guthrie leveraged her massive fame to guarantee the financial payout to those faceless criminals. Then, absolute radio silence followed. Every single forensic and investigative theory must ultimately grapple with this baffling turning point. Grieving relatives begged to surrender their wealth as two critical deadlines faded away. We saw zero bartering, missing hostage videos, and a lack of demands. Meanwhile, feds admitted all channels had dried up. Retired federal operative Harry Trombus noted that financial extortion seemed increasingly improbable with each passing day. That assessment hits the nail on the head. This nightmare completely stopped looking like a traditional hostage shakedown. When a kidnapping strays this far from standard protocol, you only have a handful of grim possibilities left. That deafening lack of communication remains the biggest clue in this saga. Forget the creepy security tapes and ignore the gory scene. The ultimate red flag dropped when perpetrators ignored a nationally televised surrender where victims practically handed them a blank check. This quiet void speaks volumes. It screams of a botched conspiracy, a deliberate decoy, or a hit squad that already finished their real objective and walked away. Every single theory suggests a drastically different criminal blueprint, leaving detectives scrambling to expose the true motive. Perhaps the syndicate completely imploded from within. Maybe a rogue henchman pulled a wild stunt. Alternatively, that massive media circus shattered their cover. Or the initial extortion notes were just a brilliant smokescreen. It could have been a theatrical distraction, masking a deliberate assassination rather than a cash grab. Or maybe a twisted mix of both. These thugs probably wanted a quick payday, only to execute their hostage when unbearable heat ruined any chance of a clean getaway. The terrifying thread linking these scenarios traces straight back to veteran investigator Andrew Bringwell's chilling forward verdict revealed that the execution wasn't the issue. but rather the overarching strategy collapse. Let's separate those elements. Flawed schemes leave breadcrumbs, and elite federal task forces exist specifically to hunt down blunders. I cannot stress this enough. The sudden communication blackout changes everything we thought we knew about this investigation. Forget the viral security clips. Overlook the gory evidence. And tune out those press briefings. The real story lies in how these monsters completely ignored a desperate, televised plea offering them a mountain of cash. This chilling quiet is highly suspicious. It points directly toward a catastrophic gang failure or a clever diversion. Alternatively, it proves this shadow crew already finished their gruesome task and simply abandoned the financial payload. All these possibilities reveal vastly different masterminds pulling the strings, leaving federal hounds digging frantically. Consider the insight of a highly decorated retired federal expert. Harry Trombitis publicly declared that a hostage payday looked incredibly doubtful as time slipped away, echoing the exact same brilliant deduction. Let that terrifying phrase sink in. Plenty of people prayed she'd vanish. The first group sits comfortably inside a towering high-rise in Midtown Manhattan. The second batch hides deep within a digital maze of pinging towers, shadowy bank transfers, and encrypted chat logs. These culprits couldn't care less about daytime TV. They are sweating over a living eyewitness. She absorbed every horrific detail firsthand, possessing the undeniable truth about the nightmare that unfolded once the lens clicked off. Her inside perspective is basically a ticking time bomb for the perpetrators. Forget the fancy lab results and sketchy bank statements. Those merely paint a flimsy picture. Hearing the brutal truth straight from the survivor creates an absolute legal fortress for the sinister minds orchestrating that February 1st tragedy. Bringing Nancy Guthrie back alive spells their ultimate doom. Each passing sunrise she stays missing guarantees her damning story stays buried. Every moment detectives rely on dead pixels instead of her actual memories gives these criminals a massive upper hand in court. Grasp the terrifying reality of her being right at the scene. She might actually recognize a voice. A slipped mask could have exposed the culprit's face, dropping a golden breadcrumb that completely transforms this massive mystery into undeniable reality. Digital footprints simply cannot compete with an actual eyewitness. The masterminds behind this plot are fully aware, bringing us to our secondary group. Unlike the corporate side, merely wishing Savannah stays away from work indefinitely, these dangerous individuals require Nancy to vanish permanently. Two completely different groups are operating concurrently surrounding one household, driving toward identical outcomes through vastly separate methods. That profound distinction separates our main topic from cheap clickbait plastered across the internet. We absolutely are not suggesting any coordinated plot links, network television executives with Nancy's violent abductors. A grand crossover plot simply does not exist. Instead, it highlights an incredibly dark reality. One person missing for an extended time frame happens to benefit entirely unrelated agendas all at once. Corporate ladders profiting off Savannah stepping away, and the underworld ensuring Nancy stays gone, share zero overlap and remain completely oblivious to one another. Yet both forces aim toward an identical conclusion, leaving Savannah directly in the crosshairs of these colliding agendas. Such a bizarre coincidence elevates this premise far beyond standard sensationalism meant merely for gaining online views. Again, nobody is claiming morning show producers somehow collaborated with the ruthless kidnappers who grabbed Nancy. That sort of alliance is purely fictional. Our core objective throughout this entire presentation has always been focused on exposing something deeply unsettling. It reveals the chilling reality where a single disappearance inadvertently rewards totally separate factions pursuing wildly different endgame goals. Executives profiting from Savannah vacating her role have zero contact with the dangerous criminals, depending on Nancy staying hidden away. Their driving forces differ drastically, and neither side typically acknowledges the other's existence whatsoever. Both unrelated paths somehow converge perfectly, dropping Savannah squarely into the middle of this bizarre intersection. Officials handling Nancy's case have offered essentially nothing meaningful since the initial 14 days of the probe. Many outsiders wrongly view this total radio silence as proof of a stalled operation. That assumption is completely false. Federal agents simply refuse to broadcast their ongoing strategies. Bureau transparency only happens during official indictments, major arrests, or formal charging ceremonies, never beforehand. That quiet gap separating absolute proof from public disclosure is purely for case building, ensuring prosecutors possess rock-solid evidence for federal court. Relocating the Bureau's headquarters to Phoenix signals long-term operational planning, rather than a retreat. The local sheriff explicitly informed Network News that authorities finally understand the precise motive behind hitting that specific residence. He effectively confirmed an established institutional breakthrough regarding the actual intent, acknowledging the culprit might reoffend, proves detectives have established a solid profile while hunting a roaming fugitive. Agents returned to the community, thoroughly questioning locals regarding previous tenants who relocated right before the vanishing occurred. Authorities demanded contractor lists from an adjacent remodeling project, methodically crossing off names to tighten their suspect pool. Far from losing momentum, this intensive probe clearly evolved from broad neighborhood canvassing to highly specialized tracking. At the same time, authorities zeroed in on the family's Azure crossover SUV, serving as Nancy's final known location. The vehicle stayed impounded through early spring while specialists carefully tore it apart inside a guarded garage. Relatives were officially eliminated as potential suspects. Tearing down the car targets microscopic clues rather than implying familial guilt, especially while the local sheriff battles a severe internal mutiny. He even faces aggressive county supervisors utilizing ancient frontier legislation just to force him into submitting official documentation. Federal agents seizing absolute control of this manhunt happened completely by design. Bureau intervention provides necessary stability, countering the chaotic environment surrounding the troubled hometown commander, technically in charge. Agents operating entirely in the shadows aren't rushing to please journalists. They are meticulously constructing an airtight prosecution meant to withstand brutal courtroom scrutiny. The gap between those benchmarks remains staggering, since media briefings solely require bare minimum talking points. However, securing a conviction demands impenetrable facts capable of surviving grueling defense maneuvers. Evidentiary disclosures, ruthless questioning, and skeptical jurors. Federal prosecutors completely ignore media demands to focus strictly on courtroom readiness, painstakingly combing over bank histories, analyzing ping data, running automotive diagnostics, compiling psychological profiles, and eliminating potential targets naturally requires several months. Radio silence never implies failure. It represents the quiet, relentless machinery forging a truly unbreakable prosecution. Morning television has never witnessed a living nightmare quite like the one Savannah Guthrie is currently enduring. Her own mother literally vanished into thin air. Fans scrutinize her every step for clues, forcing her to endure a high-stakes federal probe from ground zero, all while returning to a studio whispered to be a literal snake pit. Stardom has proven to be an incredibly brutal double-edged sword during this horrific ordeal. On one hand, slipping into the shadows is completely impossible. Missing a single broadcast sparks massive tabloid frenzy. Stepping back into the spotlight fuels even louder rumors, stripping away her right to mourn privately. Yet her fame remains a crucial weapon. The massive star power she wields skyrocketed this mystery onto screens nationwide, well before local cops even knew what hit them. Elite government squads simply do not mobilize overnight for just anyone. They certainly ignore missing seniors in Arizona, unless that victim birthed a reigning queen of morning broadcasting. Her superstar status literally dictated the massive size of the rescue effort from minute one. Following a completely heart-wrenching broadcast on March 27th, Hoda Kotb revealed her co-anchor was coming back on April 6th. Rather than releasing a polished press statement, producers allowed her raw vulnerability to speak entirely for itself. "I honestly have no idea if I possess the strength. I am terrified I might not fit in here now. Yet I want to give it my absolute best shot. Leaning heavily on this incredible crew. You guys are my true kin, my absolute foundation. And when life shatters, you naturally run toward the ones you love most. So, I am really unsure if I can pull this off. I question my place here entirely, but I simply have to try." Clearly, she completely abandoned all traditional public relations tactics for this comeback. Glossing over the brutal truth was never an option, considering the entire world knows her devastating nightmare remains totally unsolved. Craig Melvin loudly declared she refused to let overwhelming despair dictate her life anymore. The anchor herself claimed that choosing happiness was her ultimate act of rebellion. Neither, quote, promises real closure, simply because closure does not exist yet. The investigation rages on, and her mom is still gone. A dangerous phantom target remains completely free, hiding deep within the complex web of clues federal agents are hunting. Breakfast television has truly never seen a host trapped in such a remarkably horrifying scenario before today. She was already recovering from scheduled throat surgery away from the desk when the unthinkable occurred. Nobody could have prepared her for a full-scale government abduction probe clashing directly with her physical healing process. She is balancing life as a heartbroken daughter with being a massive celebrity whose tiniest gestures are dissected for hidden clues. It forces a trained reporter to walk a razor-thin wire, trapped inside a federal dragnet where she holds heavy secrets she simply cannot air. Meanwhile, she is bracing to step back onto a set notoriously branded as a pit of backstabbing snakes during her long hiatus. Fame operates as both her greatest weapon and her heaviest curse, entirely robbing her of the chance to weep in total peace. Choosing this high-profile career effectively destroyed her right to anonymity, turning every sick day into front-page gossip. Coming back creates an even bigger circus, with true crime fanatics aggressively comparing her casual quotes to official police timelines. Yet on the flip side, the sheer velocity of this media explosion only happened because of her massive, undeniable star power. Elite federal squads do not mobilize instantly for a lost retiree in Arizona. Unless that victim raised an absolute giant of network broadcasting, the sheer magnitude of this government operation involves massive federal agencies, coast-to-coast news coverage, and enormous bounty funds, was utterly dictated by her celebrity status. Will all this insane leverage actually rescue her mother, or just complicate the central mystery? Everything boils down to this harsh, undeniable truth. A lot of her colleagues secretly prayed she would stay gone forever. The target is obviously Savannah, while the villains are ruthless insiders at a top-tier morning network powerhouse. Wishing she would fail simply meant greedy executives wanted her tragic absence to become a permanent opening for a much cheaper replacement. Tabloid insiders deliberately threw around terms like snake pit to describe the unbelievably toxic workplace culture. While these rumors stem from just one unproven leak, the sheer detail reveals extremely dark truths about that studio's actual cutthroat atmosphere. Viewed entirely through this lens, we are looking at pure, unfiltered corporate greed. The cold-blooded math of a billion-dollar broadcast machine that simply refuses to halt the rat race for anyone's private heartbreak, and the massive disconnect between those forced on-air smiles and the vicious backstabbing happening right off stage. Peeling back that secondary theory exposes one undeniable target, Nancy Guthrie. That sinister pronoun points directly to the criminal architects who orchestrated the Catalina foothills nightmare on January 31st. Praying she stayed away meant banking on the sole surviving witness to a federal abduction vanishing forever, preventing her from turning a circumstantial probe into a direct case. Under this particular lens, the entire phrase screams massive exposure. It highlights the absolute lethal risk facing an entire criminal syndicate whenever their prime target manages to stay alive and entirely accessible to authorities. It underscores the massive gap between a prosecution relying completely on microscopic lab results versus one anchored by undeniable first-hand survivor testimony. Both interpretations remain entirely factual. Both perfectly coexist together. Despite featuring separate cast members, separate drivers, and wildly varying stakes, both orbits revolve around the identical missing person, the same comeback, and the woman caught between them. Yet nobody admits the main twist. These two distinct narratives actively keep each other perfectly hidden. The corporate rivals absolutely profit from a storyline where the anchor's extended leave gets blamed solely on criminal matters. After all, while the public stays completely fixated on the kidnapping, the police work, and the family's absolute heartbreak. That means zero attention gets paid to the opportunistic replacements sitting at her desk, or their obvious resentment toward eventually stepping down. Meanwhile, the actual criminal syndicate heavily profits when the morning show drama gets dismissed as nothing more than celebrity gossip. Whenever petty studio power struggles completely monopolize the relentless news cycle and feed massive public cravings, the actual physical clues and psychological profiles receive dangerously little serious scrutiny. That haunting quote about colleagues dreading her return totally shatters both of those convenient cover stories. It firmly grips both interpretations at once and absolutely refuses to let the audience pick just one side. Savannah reclaimed her television anchor seat on April 6th, exactly 2 months after her mother vanished, without a single arrest, identified suspect, or closed case. She certainly didn't return because the shadowy syndicate fell. This story reveals a powerful truth about the world we live in sometimes. The same tragedy can serve completely different interests at the same time. On one side, there is ambition quiet, calculated, and often hidden behind polite smiles. In competitive environments, people don't always wish for harm, but they may still benefit from someone else's downfall. That is a hard reality. Success should never come at the cost of another person's pain. Yet without awareness, ambition can slowly turn into indifference. On the other side, there is something far darker: those who exploit vulnerability for control, silence, or survival. When truth becomes dangerous, it becomes a target, and that reminds us how valuable honesty really is. A single voice, a single witness, can change everything. But at the center of it all is resilience. Even when surrounded by pressure, fear, and uncertainty, choosing to stand up, to return, and to keep going is an act of strength. It is not about having no fear. It is about refusing to let fear decide your life. This is the lesson: be aware of hidden motives. Protect the truth, and never lose your humanity in the pursuit of success. Because in the end, who you become matters more than what you gain.